All right. Looks like we've got a good assortment of numbers, some fours, six, sevens, and some eights. Fantastic. Well, we're really glad everybody's here tonight. Um, we're going to do a few sabías que, where we find out what we need to find out. This week, we really want to highlight some present facts about Pride and Juneteenth. ¿Sabías que that Pride is celebrated in June because of the famous Stonewall riots that occurred in Greenwich Village in New York and lasted from June 28th to July 3rd in 1969? And in 5 days, it'll be the 51st anniversary. ¿Sabías que the largest Pride parade in the world is in Sao Paulo, Brazil? In 2006, the Guinness Book of World Records named Sao Paulo's parade the largest gay pride celebration in the world, with 2.5 million attendees. ¿Sabías que that Juneteenth was first officially celebrated in Austin, Texas, June 19th, 1867? As many of us now know, 2 years after the proclamation was read in Galveston, Texas. ¿Sabías que it's a tradition to eat red food and drink red drinks on Juneteenth? The red food and drink has been said to symbolize the blood of the millions of enslaved ancestors who suffered and died, as well as enslavement narratives from Texas recall an African ancestor being lured using red flannel cloth, and many of the charms and power objects used to manipulate invisible forces required a red handkerchief. And ¿sabías que that in 1872, Black leaders in Texas raised $1,000 for the purchase of 10 acres of land to celebrate Juneteenth, today known as Houston's Emancipation Park, where Juneteenth is still celebrated today? Cierra, back to you.
Thank you, Rebecca, for those facts. I think those are definitely something that not a lot of people know. And I am very proud of all of those facts, and so I'm glad that you were able to share them. So before we get started into other things, I just wanted to give a quick recap of some of the things that we have covered this far in June for Tuesday Night Live. So at the beginning of the month, we have covered race and society, and we discussed how racial and cultural identity can impact our lives. The week after that, we discussed race at JMU and how some of the history as well as some of the social aspects of race at JMU have impacted us. I know I talked about the first Black woman was also the first Black person to graduate from JMU. We also have talked about the intersectionality of oppression, and we've been holding discussions centered around how in order for us to fight against the oppression of one group, particularly in this case, Black Lives Matter, we must recognize that all Black lives matter. And when we say that, we mean that we need to recognize the struggles and help support the LGBTQ plus community, because they're subject to levels of hate and bigotry that many of us don't face. But now going into this week, we are delighted to have Dr. Heather Coltman, who is here with us. She's here to dialogue on equity, diversity, and inclusion at James Madison University. So I'm going to go ahead and speak a little bit about Dr. Coltman, and then afterwards she'll say what she wants to say. So Dr. Coltman is the Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs, as well as a solo and collaborative concert pianist. Born in Zambia, Dr. Coltman immigrated to the United States in 1966. She received a bachelor's degree in music from the University of Cincinnati's College Conservatory of Music and a master's degree in music from Maine's College of Music in New York. She earned her Doctor of Musical Arts degree from the University of Texas, which I love because, I'm from Texas, so yes. And since then has performed, taught, and lectured across 5 continents. I am impressed. Yeah, very much so. So we are so delighted that she is joining us tonight. Dr. Coltman, welcome to Tuesday Night Live, and thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. It's really great to be with you all and to have a chance to really talk about some of the most important things that we're all concerned about and thinking about all the time. And I was so happy to hear in Sabías que about Austin and Texas, because I grew up mostly in Austin. And of course, as you said, I went back and got my doctoral degree at University of Texas. So hook 'em horns, I love UT Austin.
Yes.
So I've been just 3 years at JMU. So this is the end of my 3rd year as provost. And it has been an incredible experience to learn about this campus, to learn about the community, and to really think about who we are sort of geographically located in this beautiful valley that was also so central to so many incredible struggles in our country, right? Not just the Civil War, but the Civil Rights Movement and many other things that were so kind of located around this area. Our proximity to Washington, D.C. means that we have really special opportunities to involve ourselves in national events much more easily than we might somewhere else. And then the fact that we have this incredibly diverse community as a refugee resettlement community and as a sort of agricultural center, and yet we've got the Merck pharmaceutical plant down the road. We have a huge Mennonite community. So I think this community itself has a lot to teach us about who we as an institution are and what students can gain from living in this area and integrating into the community, right? And giving back and working with the community. So I think about that a lot when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, is how does this institution and how do the students and the staff and the faculty engage with the community, and what does it mean? How are we shaped by the community? So yeah, it's been a really interesting experience to live in Virginia. I've lived in Texas and Florida and New York and Cincinnati, you mentioned, in Ohio, but Virginia's been a very different experience and it's great. But anyway, I'm delighted to be here.
Thanks. We're glad you're here. So I'm going to ask Dr. Coltman some questions. We're going to dialogue on some things, but we also want to hear from y'all. So if y'all have anything that y'all want to put in the chat box, in the comment section, we want to hear it. We really encourage it. And also, if there's something that you would like to say, please, at any point, just type it in the chat and we'll see and we'll let you come in and speak, okay? So based off of everything that Dr. Coltman has said, I have a question for her to start off with. So as a result of the racial injustices that are in our world and their impact on JMU students, can you share maybe some plans that Academic Affairs has this upcoming year and into the future based off of the things that I just mentioned?
Absolutely. And like I said, I've just been here 3 years, but when I first got here, one of the first things on everybody's mind was gender equity and gender bias. And then, right after that, Charlottesville happened, and there was this kind of, conglomeration of concerns. So we have kept at the forefront within Academic Affairs, we've kept at the forefront this focus on inclusivity and diversity and equity, really picking up from the work that has been done by so many people, Art Dean, David Owusu-Ansah. So as I've got to know the campus and as the world kind of turned and the situation in our society shifted, we've made it a priority to look at a whole range of things that we've started on and we're going to continue to do and we're going to enhance. So to tell you specifically, one of the most important things that we can control in academic affairs is our faculty, right? Our faculty and staff. How are we attracting diverse faculty? How are we recruiting them here? How are we able to hire them? And then how are we able to retain those faculty and ensure that they've got the support they need to succeed when so many of our Black and brown faculty are definitely the minorities, right? Very often there's one person of that group in a department. So it's really important to us that we look at diversifying our faculty so that our students can find role models and mentors who are like them. So that's a really important piece of what we've been doing. And over the last 2 years, and especially last year, we've created a hiring process that's working with HR, working with search committees, working with how do we advertise our positions, how do we, again, really proactively go out and seek candidates from diverse backgrounds and of diverse identities to apply for these positions, and then how can we ensure that once they're here, they've got a network of support and a network of mentorship to keep them successful. That's not an easy, quick fix, right? I mean, these are changes that take place over multiple years, but we certainly are enhancing those efforts as we continue to do the search processes. If we flip a little bit and talk about curriculum and programs, academic programs, I'm sure many of you know the African American and Diaspora Studies program that's currently situated in the College of Arts and Letters, but really it's multidisciplinary. It's an interdisciplinary minor. we have immediately, over the last couple of weeks, decided to elevate the funding for that program, provide them with a space that's centrally located in the Bluestone campus and visible, so that those faculty and the students engaged in those programs are much more visible. They're not just a sort of tucked away somewhere in a department. And we also want to make sure they've got the administrative support to continue the great things that they do, such as student research, curricular programming, guest lectures, conferences. We're doing the same with our Latinx programs, continued and expanded financial support and visibility. We really feel that the curriculum that we can offer students, and the more that students know about it, gives them a chance to really add to whatever their course of study might be and give them a much more diverse understanding of their studies. So that's really important. Then we want to have more curriculum discussions. There has been a lot of talk among students about a diversity requirement within the gen ed. That's complicated, right? I've spoken to a lot of faculty in that program to look at, one course on diversity isn't the answer, right? Because we don't want every student graduating with one experience. How can we embed a much broader sense of diversity and inclusion and access across the curriculum? So we're continuing to have those discussions. We've put together a new group that's going to be looking at that with fresh eyes now, infused by the expertise of the faculty. And I want students to serve on that group with us to help us plan, what do students most want to see in the curriculum? What kind of courses? Maybe they're, 1 or 2 week courses in J-term, right? Maybe it's a summer course. Maybe they are electives, and then maybe we can also look at the general education program and expanding that. So we're really going to focus on that as well, because it's not just people, it's the programming and the content of what you're learning. So I know I talked too much, so I'm going to stop for a second just to see if you have any questions or comments.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll go first and then we'll see if anyone else has anything to say. But I really am glad that you brought up the idea of diversity requirements, because I think that's definitely something that a lot of people have been talking about. So really appreciate you touching on that. And I also really like that you touched on the importance of visibility within programs and academia and schools and teachers, because I know one of the reasons why, so I got my bachelor's degree in elementary education, because I know, I can count on one hand how many Black teachers I've ever had, right? Or even how many Latina or people in the Latinx community, or even Asian teachers, Indigenous. So I think that's really important that you brought that up. And I just want to say I appreciate you for recognizing that. So is there anybody who has any input on that? Yeah, post any questions here in the comment section. No? Okay.
Let me just add one other thing too. So in my office, we have what we call the Provost Diversity Council, and that has a representative from all the colleges. And David Uwisa-Ansa works with that group to look at a range of activities and projects that we can all work on together. But within every college, there's also a diversity council. And I met with Cynthia Bowerly today. She's the Dean of the College of Science and Math. And she told me she had just met with her college's diversity council, and they've got an 18-point agenda for what they want to do to expand diversity initiatives and awareness and training in her college. And I know that other colleges have that as well. So, I might not know all the details, but I do know that every dean without exception takes this work very seriously. That's a high priority. So I'm really excited to see what efforts are going on. I know college business has that, visual performing arts. So how we can best coordinate and tell the story of what's changing and how students are reacting. And again, what's key here is getting student input into that. So I was excited to hear from the College of Science and Math.
I see that there is a question in the chat from Lena. I don't know if you go by Lena or Lena, so sorry. They say that, not sure if you have seen this yet, but they are curious on anyone's response to CMS's statement that was made. In particular, does anybody have any thoughts about that? Or I don't know if you want to maybe elaborate more about the question.
I think, so it wasn't, well, what I have is not a question from, or a statement from CMS, but an email from the student organizations advised by CMIS with a list of their expectations. I did get it late in the day today. I actually, when I saw it, I was happy to see that it's a lot of what we've heard on the town hall. So I've been working on pulling that together, and I know Heather had staff on the last call that we had pulled together some of what we'd heard from the students. So luckily what we heard and what is in the letter is very similar. So that helps that we were sort of on the same page with what we had heard from students on a number of the town halls. It's only been probably 5 hours, 6 hours, I guess, since I first saw it. So I haven't actually had a chance to sort of respond other than my plan is to get working on it. I think a lot of it is things that we, again, had heard already. So I want to make sure that we do that. We also have we've gotten some other inquiries from students. I know biology students of color group we heard from, and we had a meeting about that last week because we got a letter from them. So what I'm trying to do now is pull all the different things we've heard from students into one thing so that we can start working on it. And I talked to the president about it today on how to move forward and start working on things. So, you know, my plan is to get moving and working on these different things and see some things actually are there, but apparently we haven't done a good enough job explaining that. Other things have been in progress but not finished, and other things were new. So the plan now is to get moving. And I know for me at least, I'll be getting a group together to start working on those things pretty quickly.
Yeah, thanks for that input, Dr. Miller. I see there's some questions in the chat, but before I get to those, I really want to ask Dr. Coltman this one question. So some of us have been listening and learning from various students, and has been brought to people's attention that some students, particularly in this case, Black students, have been experiencing racism and discrimination from professors of theirs. So I was just wondering, how can students report these instances in the future, and how can JMU hold professors accountable in the future as well?
Well, first off, before I sort of respond with the provost hat, I just want to say that it is just so disappointing to me that we have that happening on campus. We know what happens out in the world, but I would never want to hear that that happens on our campus. But now that we've heard that, I mean, not just now, we've got to acknowledge it. We cannot be afraid to confront faculty who are treating students in ways that are completely unprofessional and inappropriate and actually hurtful and discriminatory. So, you know, we've got to be unafraid in talking about it. And that's one of the first steps, right? Because very often these kinds of issues get swept under the rug. You know, you push it off, you write something, it goes in somebody's file, 2 years go by, another year goes by, and you know, we're not making any changes. So how we would make those changes is really important. It's kind of like what the president said in his message yesterday, right? Making changes is important, but how we make changes is important. So I also am aware that there are Black faculty who have often experienced racism from students. And there are Black faculty who experience racism from white faculty. And it goes student to student. So it's a holistic issue. And I think just trying to look at faculty to student is missing some of the steps that we might want to take. Now, you know, the obvious answer is let's do some trainings. Let's make sure everybody has, you know, bias trainings. Yes, we have to do that, but that's very often not sufficient. One of the things that I heard as an idea just since the CMIS town hall is, what if we could create a diversity sort of advocate, almost an ombudsperson for every department? What if there's a person, a faculty, a staff member, a grad student, identified, you know, with a sign outside their office door that says, this is a safe space. Come and tell me what you've experienced. Process it a little bit, and then have that advocate or ombudsperson take the complaint with the student forward. I think what so often happens is a student who's been placed in a situation of experiencing racism doesn't necessarily feel strong enough often to go forward with a complaint process. So, you know, we want to set up systems that the student who has this issue feels supported, has someone with them, and then we need to make it very clear where they go. I mean, the obvious place is you go to the department head, right, of whichever department the faculty member's in, like for the student as well, right? that's the very first step. But we know that can be intimidating, right? For a student who's never met with a department head and it doesn't know what that means, it may feel scary to do that. So having an advocate could be a really important step. So that's an idea I heard. I want to know what other universities have done. Perhaps that's a process that is in place other places. Maybe we can learn best practices. I haven't even had a chance to talk to Dr. Miller about this yet to see, what his suggestions might be. We want to talk with students and faculty as groups, perhaps folks in faculty senate, perhaps students from CMUS or from elsewhere in student government or in student affairs, to really look at what would be fair, what would feel safe, and what would really be able to have meaningful change, not just let's report this and then put the report in a drawer somewhere. So it's going to take a lot of people thinking carefully through what this would look like. What comes to mind is we have a process for Title IX. There should be a similar process, right, for these kinds of incidences. And there are harassment policies, et cetera. But in this particular time, with these particular situations and the attention and concern that's being expressed, I think we need to really focus on how we can make people feel safe and supported such that they can advocate for themselves and that we can make change. So not a specific plan, but certainly something that we want to focus on.
Heather, do you mind if I add something?
Please, go ahead.
Just the other day, I was meeting with staff in CMUS, and we were reviewing the university's bias incident reporting system, and really want to make some changes to make it, well, not a little, to make it more specific. I think that it's a pretty generic form, and it leaves out a lot of the detail that I think we would want. So we reviewed the form I was a part of updating and changing from a previous institution that has a great deal of specificity in the questions that it asks. So I think that we need to put a system together where folks can put their information in and then it's actionable. I also think that we need to put that access to that in lots of places, not just one place, and hope people find it. So it's got to be more accessible than it's been in the past. And then people need to know this goes to this place, but also it'll then be connected to whatever department or organization that it relates to. Because I don't want students to feel like it just goes to, randomly out into the bureaucracy and they have no idea what will happen with it. Similar to how we do with Title IX, like you said.
Well, and Madison Cares is something that puts all the pieces together. And I could see us instituting that as well, such that a student, or maybe there's multiple students who've reported something on the faculty member, somebody needs to be tying all that together. So a kind of Madison Cares model or framework as well is important to think about.
Yeah, thank you. So I know, appreciate you for that input. And something that you mentioned in that made me think to go ahead and ask this next question. So there has been a lot of discussion regarding the names of Jackson, Ashby, and Maury halls, all named after Confederate figures, of course, we now know. And there was a statement made by President Alger yesterday regarding the topic. Can you give some insight on what the process looks like to enact this change? Because we know that, of course, naming buildings is not something that can just be, just fixed overnight. So can you give us some insight on how that works?
Sure. Well, what we had discussed with the president was really dividing it into two steps. And the first step is with the removal of the old names, right? And so that step, I feel like we've made a lot of progress on. And that involved, certainly we have to adhere to our policy on naming of buildings. And that policy did say that the Board of Visitors needed to sort of sanction that. So I know that we're making a lot of progress on that first step. The second step, which is identifying new names and selecting new names for the building, again, there is an existing policy, and that policy is managed by the Vice President for Advancement, Dr. Nick Langridge. And so that policy also requires that the board would approve any new names. We are in discussion now, working with Dr. Langridge as well as some of our faculty experts like Dr. Mulrooney and other folks from across campus to really look at what's the best practices for renaming buildings. We know that UVA has done this. We know that many universities have done this. What are the best steps? How many people do we involve? How long does it take? Do we need to look at the history. We need to look at the context. We need to solicit recommendations. Do we solicit them just from current students? Do we include alumni? Do we include the community members? So these are the questions that are happening right now. In fact, I know there was a meeting this afternoon exactly to start breaking down what will the process look like? How long will it take? And then ultimately, whatever group determines those recommendations would send it up to senior leadership, which would then make a recommendation to the president, who would then make a recommendation to the Board of Visitors. So it's bureaucratic, right? But it's an inclusive process. And it takes time, which can feel like it's not really happening, right? But I think the most important thing for our president is making sure that many voices can be heard. And I know that that's the plan going forward. So even though the policy is operated by Dr. Langridge, all of us on the senior leadership team certainly have a say and have the opportunity to express our opinions and have representation on those committees. So my hope is that we do it kind of quickly. I know that there's talk of taking the whole next academic year. I'm not sure if there's a way to perhaps target one semester. So that's something that I would like to kind of push for, is that do we really need a year to do this? But you know, there's a lot of factors and a lot of voices to be heard. So we'll see what's decided. I don't know, Tim, if you've heard anything different on the time frame.
No, I mean, I think the first step, like you said, it was most important to remove the current names. And then I actually would prefer to not rush the process so that we can gain as much insight and to have as many people have voices in it as possible. I mean, I would sort of a little bit answer the last question that's there. I don't mind a policy that requires the board's vote to change a name, to name something, because that means we've got to go through our due diligence to convince them that we've done the work. And my goal would be that students will feel like they've had their voice heard in this process. They'll have the opportunity to say, here's what I think the name of this building, that building should be. So I would rather take some time and do this right than rush it and have everybody say we weren't inclusive. So I get that there are sometimes policies that we don't like, but having our board vote for this is actually a great thing. I think if you know our board and connect with our board, and Norman can maybe chime in on this, it's a great representative group with a large number of JMU alumni. And I like that they have to sign off on this. I think that makes sense. I don't think I should get to decide this myself. So I like that we're going to force time into this to make sure everyone has an opportunity to be heard before a decision is made.
Could I take off my provost hat and just say one thing as Heather Coltman, not the provost? Can we please have more women honored in these names? The huge percentage of buildings on this campus are named for men, and we love men. There's no problem with men, but there are so many extraordinary women who are alumni, who are faculty, who are, you know, people who've been completely committed to this university. I mean, we started out as a women's college. So if I have any influence, I want to have all three names be women's names. Sorry. Okay, I'll put the provost hat back on.
And really briefly, I know Dr. Miller gave me a shout out. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Go, Norman, go.
All right, sorry, just wanted to check. As far as my role with the student, as a student representative to the Board of Visitors, being in conversation with the board to try and share what students are thinking and feeling, and also being in several meetings in the past couple of weeks. I echo Dr. Miller's sentiments in that the process is there for a reason. So granted, that doesn't mean it should take us 10 years to make this happen. We should certainly try to make sure we do all of the necessary steps to really do our research and evaluate the histories of the people that we want to honor on these new buildings. So I know that Provost Coltman mentioned a bunch of different working groups that are coming together now. I guess at this point in this process, coordination is the name of the game. So we're on the student end. I've been meeting with President.
We lost you a little bit there, Norman.
Black student organizations as well to try and garner student impact. That's all to say this. 1 second. Hold on. Let's see if we can get this right.
We really lost him there.
Sounds like he was driving, maybe. Probably. Well, hopefully he joins us back soon. But I'm going to go ahead and ask some of the questions that are in the chat. So the first one, oh, he's coming back in. There's Norman. Let's see. Norman, can you hear us? No? Okay.
Oh, I had it muted. Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about that.
You're good.
But as I was saying, there's a number of different efforts now to start and get coordinated. And hopefully to everyone who's students on this call, but faculty as well. That's not to say that one effort is more important than the other. I think what we all want to do is come together so that we're all on the same page to move forward. So on the student side of things, other than reaching out to faculty and senior administration, because I highly encourage that, if you'd like to know more about the conversations that I might be having or conversations with board members, feel free to email me, feel free to DM me on any social media platform, because like I said, it's important that we make this a collective process to do the right things moving forward. And it's more than just the buildings as well. I know that there's a lot of emphasis on doing more than just these three. So, including other buildings like Wilson or Godwin, but also moving on to do other actions within the university. So I'm certainly not the only source, but I would love to hear from students, and I would be more than willing to share any feedback or ask any questions on your behalf to the board to try and make this process as best as possible. So that's all I got. But.
Thanks, Norman.
Yeah, Norman, if you would like, you can probably go ahead and put your email address even in the chat, just so if anybody needs to contact you, they can have it. But yeah, thanks, Norman, for all that you do. So going back to the chat and looking at the first question that was messaged in anonymously. So since we have the provost and Dr. Miller here today, how will student affairs and academic affairs work together? So of course, there are councils in both divisions and there are efforts in both. So how will they work together this year? So y'all want to go ahead and chime in on that?
So I have to say that one of the strongest efforts going on at JMU is the partnership between student affairs and academic affairs. I have a great relationship with Dr. Miller. I have incredible respect for him and his goals and vision for JMU. He has spent a lot of time getting to know the academic affairs leaders. And so I feel that we have a great opportunity to dialogue and share common goals and then really do the hard work of coming together. We all talk about on campus the different divisions, right? There's the division of administration and finance. There's the division of student affairs, the division of academic affairs. That sounds like we are divided, right? We should not be divided. There should not be silos. We should all be working closely and coordinated together. So we are making very deliberate efforts to make sure that we have representation on each other's groups, each other's committees, and then set priorities where we can strategically work together. So, Tim, I hope that I didn't embarrass you, put you on the spot. I hope you agree with me.
Yeah, I mean, I would sort of jump in. I think, and sort of in addition to what Heather said, and ditto to her, I think I also enjoy a good personal friendship with the provost, and I think that matters. I think that it's one thing to work with people; it's another thing to actually enjoy being around them and with them, in other settings. I mean, Jamie and I have had dinner at her home, so I just think that friendship and relationship is the key to how a lot of things that I believe in life and in the world get done. And I think that, Heather and I actually spent a good amount of time last night on the phone after hours, and sort of we basically agreed that Monday nights are going to be when we talk. And I think we've done that regularly and we've stayed connected. But I think that we almost have to remind ourselves that we can't take that for granted, because the work of what we do is so integral to the student experience, that when you're in the class and out of the class, we're working on those things for you and on your behalf. So I think there is so much that we have done. There's so much that we would continue to do. And I have to say, this being, the third university I've worked at, it's really the first again, but third total. I have to be honest, I've not seen the two people in our jobs like each other at the other places I've worked. Not even work together, like each other at a most basic level. So I feel very lucky to have Dr. Coltman as a colleague and friend, and I routinely get together with several of the deans. I've played in a band with the College of Arts and Letters, Dean, Dr. Gide, Brad Newcomer and I have a monthly meeting that we get together. So there's connections across the divisions, as the provost said, where we're able to get work done and we're able to learn about the student experience and see how we can connect and make it better. I think there's work to be done. I think I've not done enough outreach to the deans. And then sort of, if I can take it beyond us for a second, our staff knows and is connected to people across the university in academic affairs. They teach in many of the schools. They're connected in ways that really matter. So I do think that there's this constant back and forth and connection. And in many schools where there's a battle there, I just don't feel the battle here. And we're also the two newest people on senior leadership. So there's also a newness to that and a seeking out the other new person to check in and learn from each other and help each other. So I just think that there's that has done a lot and will continue to do even more for JMU and its students in the years to come.
And what's been a great test of some of that is the whole COVID-19 situation, switching to online, the concerns that students had, the parents who would call in, the academic advisors, the faculty. So many of the questions that were coming at us were the same. And so we would get together or put our staff together to make sure that we were communicating consistently, that we were trying to get decisions made at the right time with the right set of information. And there have been thousands of emails where I'd copy Tim and say, here's the student, they're a senior, they're in health sciences, they've got a question about dorms, can you answer them? And then he'd send me a student saying, I got this parent, the kid can't get in this class. And so, it's a very hands-on kind of partnership so that we can ensure that students are getting served the best way they can and that our staff are being supported as well.
Sorry, Cierra, we won't answer as long for every question.
We're obviously excited about working together.
Well, I'm glad y'all have that passion. So that's what we need. So we're happy about that for sure. Based off of that question, going into this next question, is the university, Ben asked, is the university working on ways to create safe spaces for minority students outside of CMUS?
You want me to start with that one, Heather? So it's an interesting question because I think CMUS has been thought of in so many times in so many ways as the hub of this. And I think that we've rested on that for too long. So in my mind, we need to figure out what that should look like and how we should do that. I think that I'm not going to call anybody out, but I think we've talked about cultural centers a little bit and how to do more than just having one place that's supposed to be, I appreciate inclusion, but also sometimes certain communities need a focus. So I think there's a responsibility we have to look how we expand that and grow that. I think how to do that is a really big challenge, and there's a lot, honestly, there's a lot to read, there's a lot to do. And I think that I don't have a, yes, we are, and this is how we're gonna do it. I have more of a yes, we are, and there's work to be done. So I really want to, all I can continue to say in many of these cases is, I came here to do this work. This work is still in me and in my blood. And I think when you look at what we have, how we focused the time, my time since I've been here, will continue to be a priority for me to make sure our students can feel like they belong anywhere and everywhere on this campus. We're in the process of a strategic plan right now and proposing 6 values of what student affairs should be about. And one of the ones that I honestly just stole completely from Brene Brown and all of her work and research is belonging. And my approach to belonging, and really it's just Brene's approach that I've decided that I like a lot, so I'll steal, is every student should be able to be anywhere on this campus and be accepted and welcomed and feel like they belong for who they are, rather than feeling like they have to fit in by changing. And that needs to be everywhere. And that needs to be everywhere for every student in every inch of this campus. Don't ask me how I'm going to do that. I don't know yet, but that is for me a priority and a goal that I have for JMU. And I don't think JMU lives up to its promise and its potential until we get there.
You mind if I chime in a bit on this? So it seems very obvious to me that the individual deans are really eager to create spaces as well for their majors and for other people who come into the buildings that they occupy. And there'd be one example of this, and y'all need to help me out with the name of this. So Bessie Mohanja taught a course in the spring for AAAD, and the students created an exhibit at the end of it. And the whole thing was shown at the Institute for Visual Studies, which has now changed its name to the Center for Creative Inquiry, Center for Creative Inquiry, something like that. Anyway, what happened was Bob Colvord and Cynthia Bowerly, the deans of SCIS and CSM, saw that exhibit and said, we want it over on East Campus. So we all supported totally the transfer of that entire exhibit over into, I believe it was, I don't know if it was NGO or the bio building. But that's something that I think we want to really make sure happens, that these spaces, these safe spaces, are not just seen as places at the Union or at the Quad, right? That East Campus, Rose Library, right? The new College of Business building, that there are spots everywhere you go where faculty and staff are there and signaled to be there. Maybe it's a sticker on the office door. This is a safe space. I'm here to be your ally, your advocate. And I know that they're thinking about this as well. So it goes beyond having one or two special spaces, right? I think there needs to be this kind of scattered approach so that wherever you go, you can feel you've got that place to be welcomed and to feel safe. So we're working on that.
And I promise that I wasn't going to answer every single time, but anyone who's not committed to that isn't part of this community. Like if you're interested in creating a space that's exclusive, then that's not the person that needs to be here. And that might feel, actually, I don't care what that feels like. If you're interested in exclusive places, then this is not the place for you. Period.
Karen, thank you so much. Black Studies, Black Spaces, exactly. And I went and visited that course, and one of the students said to me, so what do you think about Black spaces on campus? And I looked at her and said, could you give me a campus tour and show me the Black spaces? And we had that scheduled for the weekend that we shut down because of COVID. So she just emailed me the other day, and we're going to be having that meeting because, that gets at this point. It's not just a space, right, for Black students and a space or LGBTQ students. It is all spaces that need to have that welcoming feeling.
Thank you. I'm going to go
I
ahead.
wanted to comment.
Oh,
I wanted to comment on that diversity and inclusion. I don't know if it is okay.
Of course.
Okay. My name is Nico, and I'm a graduate student at JMU MBA program. I'm from Angola, Southern Africa, and I really like the concept of diversity and inclusion here at JMU. And I think that most of the institutions of higher education, particularly JMU, really has a very difficult time attracting and retaining student or faculty from different backgrounds, because especially when professors come here on campus, new professors, they arrive to JMU and they don't know more about the campus and stuff like that, and they want to leave, they want to go somewhere else. And I applauded the idea of working alongside with human resources, the HR, to create an environment where faculty from all walks of life can apply for a job at JMU. But also, I think it's important to partner, to work alongside with Harrisonburg community. Here in Harrisonburg, it's very diverse, and there are multiple languages that are spoken here in town. And I think it's important to identify individuals who speak different languages, and work alongside with them so that when the new faculty come in, they want to go to Walmart, or they want somebody to talk to them in their native language about the mission and vision of JMU, where to go to church, stuff like that, and what kind of program and activities that happen here in town. So it's important to have those individuals that speak different language to tell them about all those issues so that they can feel more welcome and more inclusive at JMU. But also one more last point that I wanted to make is that on campus, there are individuals that go through a lot of mental health issues. It is important to have a diverse workforce in health department so that people that go through, people that need help with mental health, any kind of help related to health, it will be great for them to go and see the diversity. And once the framework is in place, they may feel more welcome and more inclusive. So that's what I wanted to add.
I really appreciate that, Nico, and it's really nice to meet you. You probably heard I was born in Zambia, so it's cool to meet another person from Southern Africa. I know that the HR department has a program to try to help new employees get connected in the community, but I'm going to take your comments and share that with Rick Larson, who's the head of HR, just to try. I want to find out more about how we connect with, if we can identify a country or a background that someone is coming from and find partners in the community. I think that's a really good idea. So thank you for sharing those thoughts.
And again, really quickly, I think, Nico, one of the things that I think we need to do more of is with such a rich community around us, and Dr. Coltman said that early on in this conversation, the diversity in the community around us, and how do we actually integrate more with that and more, and what I mean is, how do we learn from that? How do we connect? And honestly, how do we represent that? I believe that universities should represent the community that they're within. And I think we have some work to do there, obviously. When I think about different universities where I've worked, I think there should be, you should look at that, look at the community, and then look at the school and say, oh yeah, there's definitely some connection point there. And I think about students at Harrisburg High School, local high schools, that should be one of the biggest feeders through admissions to us, is through those local schools. I remember we had a young woman on the Board of Visitors panel in the spring who talked about the struggle she went through to get here, but spent a lot of her life watching JMU and wanting to be here. That was sort of her goal, and she really worked hard academically. That wasn't the struggle, but she basically said she had to fight almost us to get in here, even though she was qualified. We've got to figure that out, and we've got to connect more to the local community than we have.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Nico. I really appreciate your perspective. So I know we talked, Dr. Miller, you touched a little bit on policy, but we do have a question I guess we want to talk more about. So are we planning on changing certain policies that were brought up? And they said we created them, and so they can be changed. Policies often present themselves as obstacles for individuals / communities who hold identities that are marginalized. So if anyone wants to speak on that, feel free.
I'll do a real quick. I am known for saying people over policy as a life motto. If you tell me if it's a choice between a person and a policy, I'm going to pick the person every single time. I'm shocked at how many policies we have. I actually, when I was transitioning here, I had this goal. I was going to read the policies until I went to the policy page. And then I asked the people that were helping me transition, I said, can you tell me the policies I should read? And then I got a list of about 20, so I read those. I think that we need to be willing to challenge the policies that get in our way and ask why they're there. For example, tomorrow the provost and I are in a conversation about Title IX and how that's going to shift and change university policy. So I think that we have to, similar to some of the questions about faculty concerns that I know the provost talked on before, we've got to find a way for people to feel like they can say, this isn't working for me and here's why. This is getting in the way of my success and here's why. Here's what I need from university and this policy's in my way. And I got to figure out, how do we have people tell us that? Because part of the problem for me is I don't know that a policy is a problem if people don't tell us. And again, even for my own process of coming in, I couldn't read every policy that we have. But I will give you one quick example. We've been talking about flex work and telework for our staff. And as you know, everyone has moved to that, but the official telework policy for the university does not allow for classified and wage staff to telework. So that's not okay. We just proved that they can for 3 months. So we asked our member that's on the policy committee to take it back to that committee and say, we just broke our own policy for 3 months and proved that wage and classified people can work and can telework. So our policy now needs to reflect that reality. So I think it's taking the time when you notice the policy's in the way of people and of success and progress, and then challenging it and fixing it.
I think this is a really great time in the institution's history to look at policy, because before Tim and I got here, people who'd been in our positions had been here for very, very, very long periods of time. And many of them had come into those positions from being at JMU. And so therefore they knew the policies, they'd created them. They didn't go back and revisit them, not because they were negligent, but because they knew them. We come in and we're like, wait, what's that policy? And, you know, there may be gendered language that's biased. There's certainly were some languaging in some of the academic affairs policies that we upgraded my first year here. So I think it's really good to have fresh eyes come in and not rely on your institutional memory, but actually look at the real words of the policy to see how it's relevant now. I mean, another brief example, we have more and more transfer students, more and more students coming in with dual enrollment credits and, you know, all those other extra additional credits that they've earned, AP and whatever. We've got to adapt our policies to allow for that. So, you know, policies could get in the way, but they also allow you to constantly change, and they push the change, right? We push the policy, but the policy pushes the change. So I'm really excited that we've had a chance to look at some of these things and make these changes incrementally. It's a balance of being creative and fresh thinking, and then being really detailed and meticulous about the actual language in the policy.
And I think also saying, does anyone know why this policy exists?
Right.
And sometimes the answer is nope, not sure. And sometimes it's, oh yeah, we do, this is why, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah. I think that you got to be willing to ask that question. And if no one knows, then maybe we don't need it anymore.
And a lot of times the policy is made for the exceptional person who behaved badly. So we create a whole policy around one person where you've got 1,200 people who've never done this thing and are never going to do this thing. And yet we're all stuck with this policy. So yeah, asking that question, why is it here? And do we need it now? That's important.
Yeah, and not reacting in the moment to one incident is so huge. I'm sorry, Cierra, last thing I'll say. There have been a couple of student incidents since I've been here, and a couple people are like, so we need to put a policy in place. I'm like, no, a student made a bad choice. Tell the student they made a bad choice. Let's make sure they learn from it, and let's move on with our lives and their lives. Don't create a policy that's going to hinder the lives of every student because one student made a choice, and that student's not a bad student. They made a bad choice. So I think we've got to separate the people from the choices sometimes in these situations, not sometimes, always, and not leap to new policy, new rules every time there's a thing that doesn't go perfectly.
Thanks for y'all's input on that. So for the next question that was messaged in, I know Dr. Coltman, you talked a little bit about diversity requirements and things of that nature, but this question in particular says, an email went out to faculty about embedding anti-racism into their curriculum. What are your thoughts and how are you supporting that effort?
So from what I understand, we had a huge number of people sign up for that training. And that has been something that I think JMU is particularly strong at through the Center for Faculty Innovation, and also through the efforts of many of our interdisciplinary programs and other curricular programs and committees. Folks here are really serious about improving their teaching. I have never come across a faculty so committed to improving themselves and so willing to say, wait, I can do better. Right? So often we think of faculty as being sort of arrogant and know-it-all and, you know, egos. Here, I think the faculty generally really want to improve. So CFI does amazing workshops for faculty, whether it's in small groups or large groups or you know, day-long seminars. And especially around COVID, the libraries have done all this workshop and training for faculty. So the work that has come up just this summer on this sort of anti-racism training, I think is really valuable, and I want to support it as much as we can. Now, you know, I don't know what that means, whether we need to purchase resources, whether we need to, you know, figure out whatever kinds of materials are needed. It is critical that we offer this. I'm going to take a risk in saying this. I'm going to take a page from Tim's book because he likes to say risky things. I'm going to bet that many of the people who sign up for that are the people who need the anti-racist training the least. Does that make sense? So a faculty member who's entrenched in their beliefs and who doesn't think anything's wrong is not going to go sign up for that, right? So how do we encourage others to see past their blind spots and to be willing to be humble enough to say, you know what, let me take this workshop. So we are definitely going to be looking at ways to increase participation, but also who participates and encourage participation. I think a lot of that guidance can happen from the deans. Deans are holding all sorts of college-wide meetings, department meetings to look at how every department operates and how we hire and how we mentor and how our curriculum develops. So I think that within each unit, we're going to see a lot more of those conversations, and I definitely want to support that in whatever ways I need to.
Yeah, so Caitlin asked a good question regarding that topic. So how could you combat that, and why can't we make it required for faculty or even staff to have certain diversity trainings so that they can be aware of certain issues and know how to navigate their workspaces better in that regard?
That's a really good question. And a lot of that has to do with just sort of how universities get structured, that faculty have a lot of autonomy and they are experts in their field. And so you don't want to say to a faculty member, here, I have determined that you are lacking in this, you need this workshop. That needs to happen from the ground up, from there being an evaluation, their student evaluations, how their peers evaluate them. So that happens annually when faculty are evaluated, and the academic unit head has the responsibility to see if there's some kind of hole in that faculty member's expertise. But in terms of other training, so for example, Title IX training is required. Now, that's online, right? And how do we know that someone taking that is not going to just click through it? Most faculty aren't, right? Most faculty are deeply committed. But I think whatever trainings we do need to be more meaningful than simply a 15-minute, online module that we can do it, check a box. So we have talked a lot about how we can require faculty to sit in workshops and participate and try to stretch themselves. But ultimately, faculty do have a lot of autonomy. So it's that balance of, persuasion, seeing the greater good, modeling from peers. And those are the things that we are doing and wanting to do more of. You're waiting for Tim, right? You thought he was going to say something.
I was like, hey, I was leaving it open. I don't have a problem,
No, I've talked too much. It's the provost's time, not mine. So I'm going to be quiet over here in my corner.
That's all right. That's all right. Well, it looks like there are any more questions in the chat, but please, if you have some, go ahead and put those in there. But there's been some good commentary going on. Particularly Misty, she's wondering, similarly, might academic affairs implement similar pieces into their evaluation and tenure process so that students will get that support from both student and academic affairs? So that
I will jump in. That's in reference to how, and I know Carson's sort of behind the scenes, but I might see if she would be willing to share. Our diversity council has added, had an area of focus, and Rebecca was on it. So Rebecca, you're on. Maybe I should put you on the spot instead to share a little bit about what we're doing. All right, you're both on. Why don't one or both of you talk about it? So just so there's context to the question.
Sure, I'm happy to. Sorry for my headphones and the way I'm hanging out right now in this space. Yeah, so the Diversity Council within Student Affairs is implementing two things. One, I think we talked about on a previous call about incorporating an evaluation for 4 competency areas within social justice and inclusion as an addendum to our evaluation process. And that will start in this August as a first conversation with supervisors, and then be a little bit more formalized in the following years. In addition to that, we know our staff needs support as they start to be evaluated in those topics. And so we'll be providing weekly open conversations to all students Affairs staff members that they can engage in around a certain topic. This week we are beginning, and tomorrow will be, or I guess Thursday will be our first conversation about intersectionality. And so staff are provided with an educational piece. It'll be different every week, and then continued our learning and having conversation on how it applies to our roles and our like personal performance in our lives. And so we will eventually add caucusing to those spaces and education groups, but that's just kind of where we sit right now. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Carson. Yeah. Oh, that's my Lilith, stop. Hey, okay, well, she had some things she wanted to say as well, clearly. So I'm glad she was able to, you know, it's 2020. Dogs have a say in this world too, you know. So good, good, yeah, good for you. Well, it is 9:05. We usually try to end at 9, but you know, it's always okay. We have ran over time before, so it's really no big deal. We love that people are engaged and there's dialogue happening. So I guess from here, unless Dr. Coltman, do you have any final words you would like to share with the audience, with the people of JMU before we go ahead and tune off?
Sure, just briefly. It's very easy pre-COVID, it's very easy to sit in the office in Alumni Hall and sit there all day long and never really have a chance to talk to students, grad students, undergrad students, or some of folks in the other divisions. I'm using the divisions word again. So in a way, this is one of the benefits of COVID, is that I've had the chance to have this chat with you all, even though it's virtual, that we probably wouldn't have had, right? Had where we all face to face. And I think one of the things I really want to do is ask those of you who would like to please reach out so that we can talk further, whether it's in small groups. I know I'm doing that with Norman tomorrow, meeting with a small group of students tomorrow. But I think it's really important for me now that I've done my 3 years and we've got a lot of things underway with academic affairs. It's really important to me to feel like I understand more of what all of the rest of you are thinking and what your goals are. So I would invite any of you to, you know, when we're back on campus, stop by. Let's set up appointments, times to chat. I would just love to get to know folks a little better and get out of that administrative box that we find ourselves in so many hours a day. But this has been a really great conversation. You made me think about a few things, and I'm looking forward to hearing what comes next.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Coltman. You know, like I've said, it is a pleasure to have you here with us tonight, and we appreciate you making time, I'm sure out of your busy schedule, to be with us. So with that being said, I do want to, in case people haven't seen it, because I don't know if everyone has, I'm going to include the link to President Alger's video that was made yesterday, just so you can have that as a reference. So put that in there. Also for next week, of course, we will be back, same place, same time. And our special guest for next week is a very special guest. We're actually going to have Mayor Dina Reed join us. I think it's Dina, yes. She will be with us next week. And so not very often you get to be in a space, a virtual space of any sort, with the mayor of the city that you either live in or go to school in. So we look forward to that. And if nobody has any questions or comments, I'm going to go ahead and sign off and say thank you all for joining, and we hope to see y'all next week.
Bye-bye.